Like I did look in the mirror and I said, okay, yeah, we may not be real talented. Yeah, that was bad coaching, but ultimately I had the ball and ultimately these were my decisions. And ultimately I could do stuff to fix this. And that was really the first time in my life I was super self-aware. I was willing, I could put my pride aside and be like, okay, I have massive stuff I got to fix as an athlete.
Welcome to the Fail It Forward podcast, lessons for life, leadership, and turning failure into success. I'm John Lowry, your host, and we are thrilled to welcome Trent Dilfer. Trent Dilfer is an NFL Super Bowl winning quarterback. He had a long career in the NFL, experienced both the highs and the lows as an NFL superstar. Trent is joining us today to share with us his story, a story that involves being at the mountaintop of football, having won a Super Bowl in 2000 with the Baltimore Ravens. But he also spent many other years that didn't end in a Super Bowl victory. Those were years that involved challenge and injury and failure and tragedy. And he's here to share with us some of the really important lessons about that hard work and that journey to the top. As he shares with us some of those lessons, a couple of things that he will share that I think are important for us is to recognize that failure is temporary. He'll also talk about how when we're seeking to overcome failure, it's important that we control the things that we can control. This is going to be an outstanding conversation. We're glad you're here to join us. You had a long NFL career. I think you've been in football like 30 years or something like that. It's been a long run. Tell us a little bit about that.
I started as a ball boy when I was 10 for my stepdad at a high school. He was an offensive line head coach and literally grew up on the back of a blocking sleds. You know, those blocking sleds, for those of you who aren't familiar with football, these big metal sleds with pads on them and big guys hit them and push them. And I was the kid on the back, at 10 years old, just holding on for dear life and running, getting water and balls and running errands and, hiding out behind the bleachers when I didn't want to work hard. And started there and played every sport known to mankind growing up: golf, tennis, track, baseball, basketball. And then in high school, started playing football and was actually more recruited as a basketball player. But my stepdad, being a football player, knew that my future was in football. So pushed me to pursue that. It was a good decision. Went to Fresno State. Was at Fresno for 4 years. I redshirted, played for 3 years, and left after my junior year. And then 6 years in Tampa. I was the sixth pick of the 1994 NFL draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Played 6 years there. One in Baltimore, where we were fortunate enough to win a Super Bowl. And then 4 in Seattle from Baltimore. I was signed to Seattle as a free agent. Baltimore didn't want me back. I guess I didn't do enough in Baltimore that 1 year. I spent 4 years in Seattle. Then got healthy again. I went through a bunch of injuries that I'm sure we'll deal with and was feeling healthy again. So kind of asked for a trade somewhere I could go play. Played in Cleveland in 2005 and then suffered another pretty much career-ending injury. Then went back and finished my career 2 years with the 49ers, where I was pretty much a backup. Had to play a little bit my last year, 4 games because Alex Smith got hurt. Then retired in 2007 was my last season, and then immediately signed a contract with ESPN and worked at ESPN for 9 years. And then thought I had retired in Austin, Texas after that. And then we'll get into what I'm doing now.
Absolutely. Well, I want to go to that moment where you're on the top of the football world. You're a Super Bowl winning quarterback. I'm sure that you reflected back on some of those things that you learned on the back of that sled as a kid.
No doubt. It's amazing how when you grow up around the right messaging, work hard, do hard things, nothing's given, everything's earned, treat people well, relationship business, just the core values that football teaches, that in each stage of my life, whether, a mountaintop experience or whether a valley experience, those principles hold up. And so much of what I learned in those early years, formidable years, being a ball boy, picking up baseball equipment at the end of practice, making sure the baseball field was better than the way we found it. The gym, endless nights in the gym, countless amounts of coaches that poured into my life. So much of that, I can hear their voices in my head today, and so much of what I'm doing today and so much what I did over my career, the foundation was set by those people in those circumstances.
I've heard football coaches talk about off-season training, and that's where championships get won. And as you think about that kind of mountaintop experience that you had, and you looked back at all of the hard work, what did you learn about how life works and how the idea of working hard leads to the results that you're hoping to achieve in life?
I think, the value of hard work is one, it allows you to pursue your potential. So the harder you work, the more investments you make into all areas of your life, the more positive output you're going to have. But I think there's a emotional and mental component to it too, where you start pushing past what you think are your barriers. And I see too often people have determined what their barriers in life are. So they'll get up to them, they'll work hard enough to get to those barriers. And then they'll say, okay, I've worked hard. I've done this, and that was hard. And now I'm going to exhale a little bit. And I think what you really learn at the highest levels is you don't really ever exhale. There might be a period of time at the end of a season, and I don't just mean a football season or a basketball season, a season of high competition, high stress, high performance, where you may need to get away and recharge the batteries, but you don't ever exhale in your pursuit of reaching your potential. I mean, I'm a big believer that we can't even comprehend the human potential that God has put in each one of us. It's really our mental and emotional limitations that create that barrier. And when you start pushing through that and testing yourself in a way that you didn't think was possible, and I'm not just talking about physical activity. I mean, this is intellectual capacity. This is emotional capacity. When you start breaking through those barriers, now you really start appreciating the hard work, because now it's just not about output. It's about potential output. And look what I've been able to perform. Let's use that word. I've been able to perform X. Well, now that I know to push through my barriers, I can perform triple X. And that's when the light goes off. And you're like, okay, I'm willing to do the stuff now that I hate doing. That's hard to do. That's uncommon. That it isn't like everybody else. That's countercultural, because I know the potential of the output that not just I can have, but the impact I can have on others to do the same thing.
And so you spent a moment on the mountaintop, but much more of the journey is spent climbing the mountain. Yeah. Much more of the journey is spent in the valley and in the shadows and slipping and falling. Yeah. Talk about some of the failures that really impacted you and taught you lessons that led you to being a Super Bowl winning quarterback.
Yeah, and I'll go through kind of chronologically where they hit, and then we can dive deeper into some of them. I know it's failing forward. That I'm probably the perfect guest. I think my career's been more defined by failure than it has been success. I think it started, the first moment I remember embracing a setback was, and again, you're going to hear me use the word temporary setback a lot. A very influential person in my life in my college years wouldn't use the word failure. It was temporary setbacks. So I've kind of adopted that nomenclature as it relates to adversity. I think it's a way of thinking through it, not resting in it, because it's temporary. So I had everything was set up for me in college to be really successful. And I hurt my shoulder, and then I started drinking. I started doing stupid things and really kind of hit a downward spiral. And it was in that moment I had really good people surround me. My faith became alive again. And through all of that, I had a really good person speak into my life and talk to me about, it's not just learning from this setback that you've had for, let's call it 9 months. It's becoming better because of it. So you can learn lessons from your setbacks, your failures, but then there's one more step. It's actually doing something about it and becoming better. And he really identified some things for me that helped me, one, recognize when I might go into a pattern that's destructive, and then to how to use my experiences to not just make myself better, but impact other people. So that was my freshman year in college. And I came to know my wife through that experience too. So that's pretty cool. 28 years later. And then, a sixth pick of the draft. And, even back then, you're the sixth pick in the NFL draft, and people just assume you're going to be immediately successful. And in 1995, was my second year in the NFL, I had arguably the worst football season any quarterbacks ever had. In fact, this year with Cam Newton having a terrible year at the Patriots, there's a lot of comparisons made between how bad he was to this historically bad season of 95 that I had. I don't know the numbers, that guy Google will fact check me here, but I think I threw 4 touchdowns and 18 interceptions. I started every game. How they didn't bench me, I still don't know.
That's not the ratio you want.
That's not the ratio you want. It was a disaster. And at the end of that season, Tony Dungy got hired. And Tony sat me down and he said, hey, everything analytically says we should move on. We have 2 issues. One, your contract won't let us move on. I was too expensive because I was such a high pick to let go of. But 2, he says, I really see a lot of good in what you can become. But you have to own what happened last year. And it's not somebody else's fault. It's your fault. And you need to own this and identify what caused this. And then we got a chance to do something. And I think it was that leash. He gave me a leash, like, okay, I'm going to give you time to see if you are introspective enough to recognize your culpability in this and then start taking the actions to correct it. And I did. And that was the first time I learned about being self-aware and introspective. Like, I did look in the mirror and I said, okay, yeah, we may not be real talented. Yeah, that was bad coaching, but ultimately I had the ball. And ultimately these were my decisions. And ultimately I could do stuff to fix this. And that was really the first time in my life I was super self-aware. I was willing, I could put my pride aside and be like, okay, I have massive stuff I got to fix as an athlete.
Let's dig into something real quick. And because you've said a couple of things. This is great stuff. I want to go back to your college years because this is a really, really important point for people today. You talked about how you were taught not to use the word failure, but use the idea of a temporary setback. And now you've had the experience of living more of life and developing the wisdom. Help people understand, especially those that might be in the midst of failure, and especially young people that you're working with now who experience failure. How do you teach that lesson for them that this moment of failure is temporary? Because what we're seeing that's really tragic is that there are a lot of young people that are not able to embrace that. And as a result, they're doing things that are highly destructive in response to something that is very, very temporary.
Failure is an eternal statement. Okay, it's something I've made a decision now, or something has happened to me now that is forever going to affect me. That's a spiritual issue. In terms of performance or life circumstance, there is nothing that can happen to us that isn't just temporary. If you look at it from, I know where my fate is. I've made a decision in my life from a spiritual context to follow the King of Kings, to give my life to Christ. I know the end result is victory. So anything before that end result of victory is just a temporary setback. That's how I think of it. Now, for the non-believer, that's a different conversation. I still think you can look at it as you don't understand the human component to this, that we can overcome so much more than you can possibly comprehend. And this is where I tell people that just don't believe me. I say, go be a history addict. Go read history, because there's countless stories of massive, what you would call failures, that high performing, high achieving, happy, joyful people had the same experience, but they viewed it as a temporary setback and did the work to come out of that setback. I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, but I do think there's two elements to it. You got to know who your audience is. Is this a believer you're talking to, a follower of Christ who victory is guaranteed? So anything, knowing that if the end is victory, then anything in between is just a setback. There's no such thing as failure. To a non-believer that looks at this is it, this is the home, this is the final stop, still even to that person, history will tell you that very few things, if any, can stop you from getting out of that mud, getting out of that temporary where you're stuck.
The gravity of that failure seems so much more.
But you can't process that. Like when we lost our son, and we'll get into that, the moment of losing your son, the month after, the 3 months after, the 9 months, it feels like I'm never going to get out of this. But I can tell you now, 18 years later, you get out of it. And there is joy on the other end of the worst tragedy of your life. So I think you have to go and find other people that have done it. If you just wallow in your self-pity in the moment, you're not doing the work to get out of it. And part of the work is to go find others that have experienced something similar to what you're calling failure and how they did the work to get out of it.
And so that leads to the next thing I wanted to dig into. And so put your coach hat on for just a second. I know at this point you can't take it off in life. That's who you are. It's your identity. But very practically, coach someone on what it looks like to follow Coach Dungy's advice to take ownership of your failure and get better as a result of it.
Okay, I'll do it really quick again because I can be long-winded. What I learned, and I still use this practice today, is go evaluate whatever you're calling as the failure, right? Whatever low-performing standards you're going through. And take all the things that you can control and look at those first. Because here's what happens. Everybody looks at all the things they can't control first. Everybody. And I still fall into I have all this head knowledge, I have all this experience to it, and my first instinct is to always go look at the things I can't control. Well, he, she, that, this system, that process stopped me from doing what I want to do. Go look at the things that you can control. And if you start identifying the controllables and creating a system where you're measuring yourself on what you can control, I guarantee you, and you might go, no, you just know my circumstance. So I guarantee you, you control your controllables better, and those other things all of a sudden start to change. And they start to get better. Not perfect. You still might have a lot of roadblocks. You might have the worst boss ever, and no matter what you do, he's just a bad boss or she's a bad boss. But as you're controlling your controllables, the impact of that bad boss isn't quite as severe as it was before. And so we grade all of our people on what we call CTC, control the controllables. So all my coaches, all my players, anybody interacts in my tribe has a CTC score. And because we want, one, to evaluate them that way, and then two, to give them the chance to fix those things. So that'd be number one is identify your controllables, measure them, and then take an honest look. Are you performing to your personal standards in your controllable measurables? Then once that's set and you're still maybe in a bad situation, well, then maybe that's not the situation you need to be in. If you're controlling everything that you can and you're hitting high marks in your CTC score, then, and things are just still really negative, toxic, then now it might be time to make a hard decision and go somewhere else where those controllables are valued and we're in a healthier environment.
And so you had this moment with the Bucs where you had to take ownership of your failures and one of the worst quarterback performances of any NFL season ever. And so how'd you work through that, and where did it lead?
Well, funny story. I still get every kids want me to sign these trading cards, and I always immediately look and see if they have that year on the back. And if they do, then I sign over that part of it in Sharpie. So the kid can't, some 10-year-old kid can't go, oh my gosh, that's terrible. He just sees the Sharpie mark there.
And
it's a good strategy.
Did they have the quarterback rating at that time?
Yes. And I don't even know. I honestly have never looked at what it is. Somebody will, and they'll go, oh my gosh, that was historically bad. Well, here's the good news. 96, we start off 1-7. It was bad. And the narrative was the same outside of our building. He's terrible. He's the reason. However, in the building was much different because now I was controlling what I could control. And that's one of the lessons to this is your network, your ecosystem, your environment will recognize that you are doing everything in your power to be the best you can be. And people will start not looking at you as the reason why, but elsewhere. So we stunk, but I wasn't stinking. I was doing what I needed to do. And that was the message coming back to me from my teammates, my coaches was, hey, we're close. It doesn't look like we're close, but we're close. And then we went on this really nice run at the 90s, end of 96. I think we won 5 out of 6 or 6 out of 7. I can't remember. And now you had momentum going into 97. In 97, we did something that even Tom Brady talks about to this day, now that he's a Buck. We took a team that was the worst franchise in football, and in 17 years hadn't been in the playoffs, and we took it to the playoffs. And then we won a playoff game, and then we barely lost to the eventual Super Bowl champions, the Green Bay Packers, in their place. But we were like the Browns this year. Like, everybody had the aha moment of, oh, they're back. They've earned the league's respect. I had earned the league's respect. I got named to the Pro Bowl, which is a huge honor as a young quarterback. So now you're at the mountaintop. 98 comes along. Again, things didn't go our way. We didn't get back to the playoffs. There was a lot of adversity. But again, handling my business, trying to control what I can control, felt like actually I played better in 98 than 97. The stats may not have represented it, but I felt more proud of my performance in 98 than 97. And then bounced in 99. We're good again. We have some struggles. And then here's probably where we'll dive in a little bit. 99, in the midst of trying to climb back up that mountain. And that's the mentality. And it's forward thinking. We have a couple little setbacks and I start getting blamed again and I get benched. And at the time, I had the second longest career consecutive start streak in the NFL with Brett Favre. And I took a lot of pride in playing hurt and doing the hard stuff and sacrificing for my team. And then all of a sudden to be the scapegoat and be blamed for everything was brutal. And there's this one moment, I think we'll settle here. The backup, we go up to Detroit, backup doesn't play very well. And that week, I was driving home and I had about a 20-minute drive from where our practice facility was in Tampa to where we lived in North Tampa at the time. And there was a lake that I'd always driven by, but I'd never seen it. I mean, I'd never been to it. And I kind of took the side street and went out and parked my car in front of the lake and was listening to Christian music, and a band called FFH came on. And I never heard this song. And God kind of spoke to me through the song. It's called Holy to You. And I was just listening to the words. And then I had the album, actually. That's right. This is long enough. It wasn't even on the radio. I think I had the album. I get to the back of the album to get the phone number of the producers, call the producers to reach out to this band and tell them how much it spoke to me. Jeremy and Jennifer, who started FFH, to this day are dear friends. Stay in my vacation home in Tahoe. We're still very close. We watched their kids grow up. Yeah, a total tangent there. But there was this moment where I'm sitting out there for hours at this lake, kind of worshiping and praying through stuff, that God just reminded me of the victory is already decided. This is a setback. You're going to learn and grow from this more than anything. As painful as it is, this is one of those hard moments in your life, Trent, that you have to handle well. And as you handle them well, you'll have massive impact on those around you. I ended up getting the job back the next week. I actually played really, really well I think we won 5 out of 6 or 5 out of 5, I believe. You can fact check me. I think we won 5 in a row when I came back. And then I break my collarbone and get a 3rd-degree separation in my shoulder. Right as I'm starting, we're rolling. Like, this is the year we went to the NFC Championship game. Sean King came in, played pretty well, got us to the championship game. But at the end of that year, I was due a huge bonus. Back then, contracts were done a little bit different. They'd have to buy back a couple years. So I had a 4-year contract. They had bought back 2 more, so now I'm at 6. Well, now they have to buy back years 7 and 8, and it would have put me in the top 5 highest paid players in the league. My agent done a really nice job. Well, I hadn't performed to that standard, so the Bucks decided to move on, let me go to free agency. And now I'm reflecting back on this moment where I'm at this lake and I'm trusting God, you're going to bring me through this. And he's not audibly speaking, but in my spirit, really encouraged me. You're going to have impact through this. This is all going to be good. And then I saw the fruit of that with the 5 games and the team rallying, all this good things happen. Now, boom, I'm back in the valley. And people all the time go, well, that must have been devastating. And it actually hurts more now that I wasn't able to continue my career in Tampa, because there's something special about these guys who get to play this with the same team their whole career. But I went into free agency kind of excited about what was next. And little did I know, and you can go backwards, but little did I know that exactly 1 year after I was allowed to go into free agency, I was back in Tampa in that locker room playing in Super Bowl 35 as a starting quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens.
That's amazing.
1 year.
Just amazing.
And God, and everybody, when I'm in the media, I don't say this all the time because people are always putting too much God around it, but think about that. Like a peace in my spirit the day I get to go to free agency and I don't get this ginormous contract buyback. Everybody would have said, that's the worst thing ever. And by the way, I made 1/7th in 2000 playing for Baltimore than I did in Tampa the year before. So economically bad, backup quarterback when I went to Baltimore, bad, leaves the team he was drafted by, bad. Everything looked bad. And I had a peace about it. And then 1 year later, I'm in the same locker. We were the team that stayed in the Bucks home locker room, which was my home locker room. And my equipment team put my locker in what was my home locker.
Exact same locker.
Exact same locker the year before. And we're playing in Super Bowl 35, which this year is the 20-year anniversary of it.
Well, I will say that your number 12 jersey for the Bucks is hard to get these days.
Well, I let him wear it. I bug him all the time. Like, Tom, I need some kind of royalties now that I allowed you to wear the number 12 in Tampa. And he always texts back like the crying face emoji or something. But and Lamar, I let Lamar wear number 8. Like,
there you go. Like,
you only get better if you wear one of my jerseys after I've been there.
Well, my 7-year-old wears your jersey proud, and I try to remind him of whose jersey it is, but I've yet to convince him. So as I listen to that story, there's a couple of things I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about. Number one, as I listen to that story, and as you are working through trying to achieve what you're hoping to achieve, and you're doing all of the things that you think you need to be doing, it strikes me that it's not just one area of life. It is the whole person that has to move forward out of a moment of failure in order to turn that into a success. Talk a little bit about the holistic approach that you took to it.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. We get so caught up in let's call it our craft, right? That our identity starts getting wrapped up in our craft. So craft goes bad, identity bad. So you're in a setback, you're in a state of failure at the time, and usually process that as our identity, which again is usually tied to our craft. If you're a banker, making money, right? If you're a football player, it's throwing touchdowns or making tackles, whatever. But what I learned in this period of time in 99 was actually football wise, I was doing my craft wasn't as bad as some emotional stuff, some relationship stuff. And when I started addressing my spiritual life, number one, I always start there. And then my relationships come off of that. Then I'd put my craft in there, but with craft, you'd put kind of work ethic, right? I would build that into that as well. And then the fourth thing I would say is awareness. Just being aware of your situation and your surroundings and the people you're around. When I started looking at those things, I had kind of dug myself a little hole relationally, and I dug myself a hole with awareness. I was kind of delusional with what I thought the world around me was. And my wife and I joke about it now, she wasn't. Like, she was pointing these things out in 98, 99, what was trending. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, that's not what's going on. But she had the wisdom, the discernment to see these things happening, and I lacked awareness. So I think some fractured relationships that were mainly my fault, and a lack of awareness had kind of led me this time. So to answer your question, when again I started with my spiritual life, I started saying, okay, Lord, what do I need to fix? What can I control? A lot of it wasn't football. It wasn't my craft. It wasn't my work ethic. Some was, but not a lot of it. It was more the wholeness of who I was. It was almost like I had blinders on, and I had to have those blinders taken off to see that, oh, I'd hurt that relationship. Oh, I hadn't invested into that. Oh, I had let pride kind of take over in my life a little bit. Oh, I was a little complacent. Oh, I was a little entitled. Oh, these things are real things that are going on around me that I don't recognize. And once that was lifted and I could see it, the lessons going back to learning how to be introspective and transparent with myself, self-aware in 96, I had to then apply those again and start addressing some of the things that I could control that were causing this setback, knowing that God was taking me somewhere else. And when I went to that next place, I wasn't going to let these